want to think twice before jetting off to these destinations.
The escalating violence will strangle the tourism industry.
Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 dangerous tourist destinations. For this list, we've chosen locations that are notorious for being dangerous and that tourists are usually advised to stay away from due to their volatile and violent nature.
Washington was also concerned about the presence of Osama bin Laden. The Saudi warlord went to live in Khartoum until 1996.
We're not saying that all parts of these areas are dangerous, as some other regions of these countries are safer or actually tourist hotspots. But definitely exert caution and do your research before you travel anywhere. Number 10, Syria.
Since the start of the unrest in March of 2011, more than 100,000 people are estimated to have been killed. The conflict has also created the world's worst refugee crisis in 20 years.
The ongoing civil war in Syria makes it incredibly easy to wander into someone else's territory and immediate danger of potential death. With some government and rebel bases just city blocks apart, being caught in open warfare is a likely occurrence. Even if you get yourself an armed guide for traveling, you may find you have accidentally sided with one of the armies. Number 9. Ciudad Juárez and Acapulco, Mexico.
Gobierno federal a mi cargo escucha y comparte ese clamor de la ciudadanía. Todos los días, por lo mismo, trabajamos por enfrentar y detener a los criminales.
One of the first things to note about Mexico is that you should try to travel by air, as the roads can present problems like illegal roadblocks that could result in possible hijackings.
Recibió un mail de sus amigos que lo necesitaban en una marisquería donde estaban ellos, donde habían comido, y él se fue para allá. Y creo que seguramente los levantaron ahí y amanecieron muertos, se los llevaron de ahí.
While this isn't true for all of Mexico, the country's biggest dangers include its drug wars and police corruption.
There are easily 10 to 15,000 of those 40 who were either innocent bystanders or victims of abuses by the army, by an army that's not used to doing this.
Particularly in places like Ciudad Juárez and Acapulco. With transnational criminal organizations at large, drug trafficking has become more and more of the norm, and this makes it easier to find yourself in a jam. Number 8. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
For a fifth straight day, a war is raging between police and gangs in the slums of Rio.
With its legendary carnivals and festivals, some parts of Rio may seem like a good place for a holiday. But the sheer amount of gun crime on the streets means that anything could happen at any time, any place, anywhere. In fact, the country has one of the highest rates of violent crime in the world.
Quantos tiros você já levou na vida?
Pô, nem sei. Sei que tô com a perna, cara, ombro, todo escangalhado, pode botar assim.
Se você pudesse começar a sua vida do zero de novo, o que você ia fazer do mesmo jeito e o que você ia fazer diferente?
Pô, diferente não é voltar pra cá não, irmão.
Then there are the spontaneous dangers of cutthroat drug trafficking, kidnapping, and rape.
Mesmo eles estando usando fuzil, granada, pistola, eles têm temor pelo Evangelho de Cristo.
Number 7. Sudan.
It's 10 years now since civil war broke out in Sudan's Darfur region, but the area remains racked with conflict, with local tribes now turning on each other.
Looking past the veil of tranquil camel rides, you'll soon see Sudan as a republic hanging in the balance between war and starvation. Not only has the onslaught of the Darfur conflict resulted in the Sudanese president being indicted for war crimes.
The International Criminal Court's top prosecutor called for the arrest of President Bashir for genocide in Darfur.
It has also caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. The war between the government and rebels has made the streets a constant danger.
الدخل بهنا
Number 6. Caracas, Venezuela.
The stench of death is particularly strong on this warm Caracas morning, as dozens of people wait outside the morgue to pick up their loved ones murdered the night before.
First, a quick stat to put this place in perspective. For every 100,000 inhabitants, over 120 people will fall victim to a homicide. This means that Caracas is often called one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Why? Its poor neighborhoods have become the headquarters for brutal drug trafficking, violent and spontaneous street crime, kidnappings, and hijackings. Put it this way, some tips for traveling in Caracas include not wearing jewelry and driving with your doors locked. Number 5. Karachi and Peshawar, Pakistan. Political turmoil is the least of your worries here. Aside from the killings and chaotic atmosphere, places like Karachi and Peshawar host battles between the Taliban and Pakistani military, which can get out of control very quickly. Territorial gang warfare is also a huge danger, as accidentally wandering into the wrong part of a certain area can prove to be a fatal mistake. Number 4. North Korea. With foreigners limited to just hundreds, you can feel a little out of place in North Korea.
If I read a newspaper which has a picture of Kim Jong-il, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un, I am not allowed to fold that newspaper in half. I am not allowed to crumble it. I am not allowed to disrespect it in absolutely any way. And by the way, every single newspaper has pictures of their dear leaders over every single page.
In fact, tourists face strict travel restrictions and are constantly accompanied by tour guides. With a reportedly oppressive and unpredictable regime, as well as an uncertain security situation due to housed nuclear weapons, North Korea can be one of the most spontaneous places in the world, but not necessarily in a good way.
막 머리끼가 하늘로 서는 그런 고장입니다. 말로 표현해도 이해해 갈 수 없는 곳이에요.
Number 3. Kabul, Afghanistan. As it is still an active war zone, Kabul is unpredictably dangerous, with erratic suicide bombings and public executions a regular occurrence. With Taliban residing in Kabul and the government losing grip on almost all of Afghanistan, anyone can become a target. If you insist on visiting Kabul, some would even go so far as to advise that you take specialist war zone survival training. Seriously, if that's the case, maybe you should think twice about going here.
اگر ما بخوایم با سنی‌ها ازدواج کنیم مجبور هستیم کشور را ترک کنیم. امید دو راه است. یکی راه پول، یکی راه مرگ.
Number 2. Mogadishu, Somalia.
The sound of cracking machine gun fires welcomed us upon arrival in the war-ravaged city of Mogadishu. Many of the residents lived in fear then. Children stayed inside, for the streets outside were too risky.
The fact that it's recommended that tourists hire bodyguards to get from point A to point B in Somalia speaks volumes.
Why are they suffering? It was because it was very, very, very bad. You look at the children and nothing to eat, nowhere to sleep, always running, always dying.
Somalia has become notorious for its kidnappings, pirates, and banditry, and American citizens are often specifically targeted.
Those who resisted could be brutally punished. Al-Shabaab has also carried out a murderous attack in nearby Uganda and threatened the U.S.
Since there's no U.S. embassy present, you'd be straight out of luck when it comes to immediate assistance. Due to the scarce government control, the country is also home to mass acts of gang violence between locals and merciless warlords. Before we reveal our top pick, here are a few honorable mentions.
Every district in Old Sana'a has a mikshama, a public garden, providing food and pleasant green space between the tightly packed buildings.
Las extorsiones, puedo decirle que han muerto un promedio de unos 80 compañeros. El que quiera sobrevivir a esto tiene que pagar y el que no paga muere.
And that's contact crime, the muggings and pickpocketing, is very alarming. And the problem is that you're seeing the same faces over and over. And even though they're being arrested frequently, the criminal justice system is not processing them and they're ending back up on the street.
The long fight for control of Buenaventura has involved all armed groups in Colombia. The result? One of the world's worst murder rates. In recent years, 300 to 700 people have been killed every year.
After the U.S. offered a helping hand to put a new government in Kiev, Ukraine is now holding talks with the military alliance in Brussels.
Number 1. Baghdad, Iraq.
10 years after the fall of Saddam Hussein, Iraq still suffers from the damage wrought in the overthrow of a dictator and the chaos that followed. Now, as Iraq adjusts after the withdrawal of American troops, what is the new reality of everyday life?
Baghdad is possibly one of the first locations that comes to mind when you think no-fly zone. Despite the withdrawal of U.S. troops in 2011, the Iraqi insurgency continues, meaning the country still houses a hostile atmosphere of gunfire and public bombings.
فتنة صارت طائفية بين الشيعة وبين السنة وخلوها سببها الأمريكان يعني.
Several countries warn against all but essential travel to the country, as Iraq has limited support for tourists when it comes to policing. Not to mention that some Al-Qaeda members make their home there.
هذه سهلة تصير في أي دولة من دول العالم، مو بس بالعراق. ممكن حتى في أمريكا ممكن شخص يشتري سيارة ويسبخها وينتحل صفة رجل شرطة ويقوم بعمل إرهابي.
Do you agree with our list? Which place do you think budding tourists should avoid?
This man is in charge of a nuclear state.
For more interesting top 10s published every day, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.com.